Take your time, and then after his presentation we will eat lunch. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning still. I heard that you have a very good meetings here in Kristianstad over the last 2 days, and very productive, and then you had some good discussions on test beds and what you can do together in the future. And that's what basically the cross-border cooperation is all about. People meeting, doing things together, developing ideas, and then working on them. I know that I am just before the lunch, so you're probably hungry and waiting for the lunch, but I would just try to talk to you about our experiences from Eurasian Baltic on how to work cross-border in the South Baltic, right? We are in the South Baltic framework, we are within the project SBPIN today, one of the very nice projects in the South Baltic program. And I will try to deliver some knowledge to you, and I hope to have a discussion after that on the cultural diversities and communication in the South Baltic, and what lessons we have learned within our cooperation in Eurasian Baltic, within our partners, especially in this program area, but also how to communicate. It is very important how we communicate among ourselves to deliver those results that we would like to intend. So that was there are two main issues that I would like to address. I will take like 20 minutes, I think, and then we can have a discussion at the end. So then you could also reflect on your experiences from those 2 days that you had already in Kristianstad in this second workshop project. So Eurasian Baltic, just to bring you up to speed with our organization, is one of the pan-Baltic organizations working in the cross-border cooperation of the Baltic Sea over the last 20 years almost. We were founded in 1998, and we span all the eastern part of the Baltic Sea, with 5 countries being involved in the cooperation. These are mainly regional authorities, as you can see. The regions in Sweden, Denmark, Poland, Russia and Lithuania, but also municipalities. That I always emphasize that fact that we are multi-level in a way that we have regions and municipalities. Now 2 associations being members, Association of Eurasian Baltic, the Polish municipalities, and the Klaipeda Region Association of Municipalities, 7 of them. So we've been working for 20 years now in cross-border cooperation. So there is quite some time that we did that. There are veterans here in this room who have done it since the very beginning. Gosia is one of them. She helped to found the organization back then. Well, we are very diverse cooperation areas, and that is part of what I'm talking about today. This very diverse culture area, as you can see, because we have different countries being involved in this cooperation. And the cultures are different, and the ways of working together are different. But then you have to find a common ground, which is not always an easy task. There's always a challenge when you work together with so diverse stakeholders. We are, over the years, we have gone through, our countries, our regions have gone through significant political and social changes. That had an impact on the way we work. Back in the 90s, it was very different as from what it is today. We are now, most of the members of the Eurasian Baltic are within the EU, not Russia, but the rest is. And that had an impact on us. The way we work, the way we run projects, the way we cooperate. We are working on public diplomacy also. It's not only the projects, but projects are the main, like the gist of what we do. The projects are tackling common things, common areas of interest, common challenges, like in case of this project, for example. But it's also about diplomacy, about maintaining links, maintaining cooperation, especially in the times of challenges and crisis. This kind of cooperation is very valuable on different levels, not only on local, regional, but also national and international level. Because it brings people together in discussions and contacts, and the contacts are very important to maintain if you want to have valuable and viable cooperation on different issues, on very topical issues as well. So that's about Eurasian Baltic, not to go too much, but we are talking about the cultural differences. And of course, there is a lot of literature about that. We are not a research institution, Eugene Baltic. We are working with the concrete things. We are based in practical issues. But then, of course, there are models that can give you a hint on how to describe the differences in culture. And one of the models I really like is a model called 6D model, developed by the Dutch professor Gert Hofstede, who developed this cultural differences in organizations model, which can be very helpful when defining the differences that you can expect when dealing with representatives of different cultures. And he has been doing this research for like 50 years already. The model has been developed in the 1980s, and is very useful when you try to have the basic information about the differences among your culture and the culture of the country, the organization with which you would like to cooperate. And there are 6 of those different indicative parts. The power distance index, the individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation versus short-term normative orientation, and indulgence versus restraint. These are the elements that indicate how cultures differ. And for us, when you look at the differences, you can see that there are elements where we are very common together. Like our societies, I'm talking here about, let's have a look at the Poland, Denmark, and Sweden, that the members of this project, right? So we have organizations from all of these 3 countries. So in some of those areas, like individualism versus collectivism, we are quite common. But in others, like power distance, uncertainty avoidance, or indulgence versus restraint, there are very large differences, which can give you a hint on how people will behave in different situations. So, as I've added Lithuania here, it's possible to add 4 countries in this kind of country comparison of Hofstede model. So as you can see, looking at the Sweden, Denmark, and Poland, there is a power distance difference, right? Power distance says something about the way people have an attitude towards the distance of power, if they accept it or not. So Poles obviously are more accepted to that than the Scandinavians, which means that they are highly value authority more than the Scandinavians. So they are more, so the Danes and Swedes are more relaxed towards authority. While Poles, well, we are quite formal in approach, especially in the first time meetings. When you go to a meeting with a high representative, a civil servant or a politician, you tend to address this person differently than you would do in Sweden and Denmark. So that is something that tells us about the culture. That is, of course, something that is very formal and very general. Each of those models, they are predicted, they are quite useful, but they are not explaining everything. Because why? Because in day-to-day cooperation, where we get to know people, then those differences, they tend to disappear. The indulgence factor, for example, which is very high in Scandinavian countries and is quite low, which means that the societies in Scandinavia are more permissive and they are more relaxed in daily activities than Poles, for example, who are following the strict rules of society more. That tends to disappear when we develop cooperation. So I'm joking about our work at the ERB Secretariat, that when people ask me where I'm from, I always say I'm from Poland. But after 7 years of cooperation in ERB, it's sometimes hard to say that I am culturally, in my work, being a Pole, right? I tend to forget sometimes that there are those differences that I should follow, right? And if you talk to politicians, high-level politicians in Sweden, per name, like Acko, or Janne, or yes, then you can forget that in Poland it's a no way to do it. You cannot redo it. It's the Mr. or Mrs. Mayor or Mr. Marshal or other like very formal title this person will have. So my advice to you is like get to know the cultures. Get to know the basics of the cultures. The model by Hofstede is quite useful. You can look it up online. It's very easy to approach, to have like a basic information. But then always remember that you're working with people, and the people are interconnected, and we are living in a reality that is really globalized. And even within the countries like Denmark or Sweden, those countries have changed over the years when the model was developed like that. They're more diverse, multicultural, so the cooperation among people on cross-border level is always different. So that is something about how we perceive cultural differences, how we work with them. The second thing I would like to talk about when it comes to models is another model, but this is quite useful and is being used for transnational cooperation in the Baltic Sea region. It was developed in one of the projects in Swedish Institute recently. It's a communication model which tells us how to communicate effectively among stakeholders on transnational and cross-border level. So when you think about communication, you usually think about a process that involves at least two persons or institutions that communicate something between themselves, and it is always a double vector process, so it comes back and forth. In order to communicate, you need to bring the message across and get a response. But often we tend to forget, we focus on the target, we focus on the channel of communication, but we often forget the real target, meaning what